Welcome to Sports Picks, predictions for and preview for the World Cup 2022 in Qatar. This will be also on Sports Wars. And remember to like, share, and subscribe for those of you watching on YouTube. Here with Cody Maxwell, my nephew, and my brother Gordon, we'll be breaking down the World Cup overview of some of the teams and overview of some of the match one games, give some recommendations of where we think we're going. And then, of course, we'll have the picks up at sportspicks.locals.com for members and subscribers that will be putting up picks all World Cup. The World Cup is the most bet sporting event in the world. It far exceeds the Super Bowl and everything else. This year, it is being hosted in Qatar. The pronunciation of Qatar has a unique Arabic language that doesn't have an English equivalent. So that's why you'll hear it pronounced about 8 different ways in different places around the world. But they won the bid for the World Cup to have it in the Middle East. Some have speculated that there may have been other things involved in what got Qatar to get the World Cup, but that's another story for another day. We will mention that as rumors circulate about what may happen in the very first game, with allegations already lurking on the internet and social media that may influence the odds. But first, looking at an overview of the teams of who is most likely to win the World Cup, you have the history that prior, from the beginning of the World Cup in the 1930s, it basically alternated between Latin American teams and European teams, with no Asian or African or North American or Central American team having won it during that stretch, but some occasional good performances along the way, up until 2006. That in fact, in the 8 World Cups prior to 2006, 4 were won by Latin American teams, 4 were won by European teams. But since 2006, European teams have dominated, regardless of where the World Cup was held. It used to be the case that when the World Cup was held outside of Europe, the Latin teams had the edge. But we've had 2 World Cups since then outside of Europe, 2010 and 2014. Brazil managed not to win at home when it hosted the World Cup in 2014, famously getting crushed by Germany in the semifinals. And in 2010, Spain won it in South Africa. Of note, one argument as to why this is changing is that football, as it's known around the world, or soccer as it's known in America, has globalized, the net effect of that has been that the difference between some teams has shrunk, but also that officiating, with the amount of eyeballs on each game around the world as it becomes the most watched sporting event every 4 years, has led to less officiating, and as the professional quality of the officials has also increased, that the home favoritism has shrunk, is one argument. Another argument is that at least as to these past 2 World Cups, that weather was not much of a factor. Brazil turned out that summer was unseasonably cool. It was more like a European summer than a Brazilian summer. And then, of course, South Africa, it's their winter when they play in the summer. Right. So that was not unseasonably warm either. And for those speculating, the weather is expected to be not that bad at all in Qatar, that many of the games are being played at night. And if you look at the weather report, there's no there's no midnight, there's no U.S. 1994, Mexico 1986, Argentina 1978 kind of weather problems concerning European teams. And then on top of that, now, of course, they're going to get water breaks and all the rest if for some reason it gets really hot. So that would suggest that the old Latin advantage and sometimes African and Asian and American and Mexican advantage from World Cups played outside of Europe may not be as present as it has been before. There's also been an expansion of the number of teams that qualify, and that's another unknown factor. A third unknown factor for this World Cup is that it's being played in winter. only World Cup in the history ever being played in the winter in the recent era, modern era. And how will that impact teams? Will that actually hurt teams that play for the big clubs? How will that impact chemistry? How will that impact coaching? How will that impact discipline? And then you have a unique factor that the home team has been preparing just by itself for 6 months. You have a team without a lot of talent, or at least known talent, because they all play in the domestic league in Qatar. But they have not even been playing in that league for the last 6 months. They have just been practicing and preparing for this cup. That's mostly unheard of and unprecedented as well. You have a bit of that going on with Saudi Arabia and some other teams as well that have really had much more extensive prep than their competitors. Will that make a difference? This World Cup will also be an interesting test for an old hypothesis or an old debate. Is it better to have chemistry, coaching, consistency on your side? Because if so, then a team like Qatar could really overperform given its expectations otherwise. Or is it better to just have natural, raw talent wanting to showcase that talent on a global stage? Because while most players are playing for flag and country, there's more than a few that are playing for a paycheck. And they can use the World Cup to get big fat checks written to their professional futures. A classic example of this contrast, while Qatar will be, if they overachieve, it's an argument for coaching, consistency, chemistry. If Ghana overachieves, it will be a testament to talent. Ghana has 3 or 4 players that pretty much have never played with the team that finally decided to play for the team on the eve of the World Cup. But they're players that play in the English Premier League or in other top sides. Quite frankly, it's quite obvious they're not playing for flag and country. One of them has never been inside the country of Ghana in his life. But they might be playing for a paycheck. All of them could use a boost on the national stage. And talent-wise, Ghana's a top 20 team in this tournament. Coaching and consistency and chemistry-wise, they're the worst in the tournament. Again, they're going to have a key player at defense, key player in the midfield, and a key player on offense who've never played with each other. So, literally, which is quite extraordinary. Yeah. So we got some unusual things, some unexpected things. What we can say is the general background is only very good teams have won the World Cup in the modern era, but it hasn't always required an elite team. Now, some people think, I think that, Italy didn't deserve it in 2006, but that's another story for another day. But Italy was a very good team, not an elite team. Didn't enter the cup with one of the top 4, top 5 odds to win it. Brazil, when they've been talented and disciplined, has been an even money candidate to win a World Cup, especially outside of Europe. But they haven't even been to the final in 20 years. Yeah. Then you have the continued develop. Germany's always dangerous, and especially dangerous, honestly, away from Europe, having won multiple World Cups outside of Europe. Italy ain't in this cup. They didn't qualify. But you have the last hurrah of the great Belgium team. You have another young, talented Spain team. Might not be up to the dominant team of 2010, but still a very good and talented team. You have arguably the most talented English side in the World Cup in English history, more so than the 1966 side that won at home. You have the French who are trying to do something that nobody has done in the modern era, which is win back-to-back World Cups. So a range of, and then of course you have the one and the only, arguably the greatest player to ever play the game, who hasn't won a World Cup, Lionel Messi for Argentina. Those are some of the news headlines entering the World Cup, along with whether or not some of these lower tier teams can overachieve and overperform. Like the Middle Eastern teams playing in their native Middle East. They already have an advantage because the opposing fans can't drink beer during the game, as Qatar has banned that on the eve of the tournament after promising that they wouldn't. So they're going to do anything they can to get a little edge over those German fans who might be going stir crazy 2/3 of the way through. America's back in the World Cup after missing it last time with arguably the most talented but extraordinarily young roster as they build for 2026. Canada's in the World Cup, and some people like them. In fact, there was an ESPN predictor that suggested Canada would make it to the semifinals. Everybody else was laughing about his prediction, but if you watched Canada dominate through qualifying in the CONCACAF, and with some really great young talent on both sides of the ball, defensively and offensively, maybe they'll have some fun for the Canadians this summer. And of course, Canada, US, and Mexico host the next World Cup. So a lot of people are looking to this one for how good those teams might be in 2026. All right, so that's a sort of overarching overview. Any thoughts, Jordan?
Excellent. That's all exactly right. I'm excited for this World Cup. I think this is going to be a really, really interesting tournament, in part because of the different time of year. And as you said, how different that makes this tournament. Usually the World Cup happens in June, and every country has about a month. Players have time to recover from injuries, and they have time to play together. Managers have time to build the system and implement it. None of that will happen this year. This year, players are going straight from their club team mid-season at a crucial time in the season all over Europe. They're literally leaving their club team and 1 week later playing for their national team. So how that's going to affect this tournament, I think, is going to be really interesting to watch. There are also several really interesting teams in this tournament that have been on good runs. I'm especially impressed with the Netherlands lately. Louis van Gaal, who's a mastermind of a manager, has that team winning. Out of their last 15 matches, I think they've lost one match. And that will be a test of whether a team that's managed well, coached well, and very disciplined can beat teams with superior talent or not. The Dutch have a lot of talent, but they're clearly playing above their talent. So I agree with you. I think, and there are other stories just like that. We're going to have teams with less talent, but more cohesion, playing together more as a club, versus nations that have a lot more talent, but it's not as clear that they play together with as much cohesion. I think this tournament might test which of those two works better, maybe better than any other World Cup tournament we've seen.
Yeah, one of the things I was interested in, Netherlands will definitely be a test of recency of form. The Athletic had a piece out that said World Cup winners have come in with good recent form.
Yeah.
Now, there's a bit of a caveat this year in that they played more games in recent form than normal because of the League of Nations being added as a competition. And so the question people have is, how much is that predictive or not?
Yeah.
If it is predictive, it's a warning sign for France, it's a warning sign for England, and it's a promising sign for Denmark, and it's a promising sign for the Netherlands. The other aspect, but historically, recency of form has mattered. Winners, at least as to winners, that nobody has won a World Cup that came into it playing poorly in their 5 most recent qualifying or other comparable level of competition games.
Yeah.
The other, and this year that fits, Brazil has had good form. Argentina has had good form. Spain has had good form. And Netherlands has had good form.
Yep.
Those are the 4 talented top 10, top 5, really, arguably. Well, top 8 odds makers make to win the World Cup to be up there.
That's right.
And the other aspect is the coaching. I mean, historically, this little book, Why Everything You Know About Soccer Is Wrong, has all the numbers game, as they call it. Several other soccer books, Mathletics, some other ones, have all talked about how certain coaches from certain countries produce an overabundance of quality coaches whose teams consistently overachieve in international competitions. And those have been the Germans, the Dutch, and the Italians.
Yep.
What's interesting this year is that not a single team outside of the Germans and the Dutch themselves have a German, Dutch, or Italian manager. That there's this proclivity to hire local, which I've never quite understood fully. And then now you have some Spanish and some Portuguese coaches at some places, but you have a lot of African teams being coached by African coaches. You have Latin teams being coached by Latin coaches, America coached by an American coach. You go back, the World Cup performance in for the tournament at least, for the U.S. under Klinsmann was one of our best performances, one of our best overachieving performances. When Greece won the Euros, coached by a great German coach. When South Korea or Australia or Russia has made runs, often it was with a Dutch manager, guys like Gus Hiddink. So whether or not I think it's a mistake for a lot of these programs not to bring in the elite coaches.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side this year, at least as to Argentina and Brazil, is that normally they have hired coaches based on them being great players in the past. And that has almost always been a mistake. This time, they both have exceptionally smart local home product managers. When you break down the tape, Brazil plays extraordinarily disciplined ball, a combination of high pressure and containment as a whole team. And you see the discipline in things like there might be a temptation to want to intercept a pass, but his defensive structure wants a certain pass to be made. So, and you watch them on tape, they don't breach discipline. And a lot of these guys are offensive players. And we haven't seen many super talented Brazilian teams with extraordinary discipline while maintaining offensive creativity. There's a good reason why Brazil is the #1 favorite to win this World Cup. Aside from the fact when they're talented and even somewhat disciplined, there are 50-50 odds to win the World Cup, especially outside of Europe. So they're at plus 350 currently. Basically, they're saying about a 1 in 4, 1 in 5 chance of them winning it. Only because of the quality of some of the competition, I think, for them in this World Cup. Do I think that those odds are about accurate? But I would lean Brazil as my favorite. Argentina also been very disciplined, hasn't lost in 35 matches.
Right.
It's Lionel Messi's last hurrah, probably. I mean, he could probably come back in 4 years, but he would look like Maradona at the end. If he's the greatest player in the world, kind of needs to win a World Cup to prove it in a lot of people's estimations. I think in his own estimation, he deeply loves Argentina. There's multiple articles written about he left early as a young kid, had health issues, grew up playing and developing in the Barcelona system, but he's always considered himself Argentinian and hasn't always considered himself welcomed, or it hasn't always been reciprocated by Argentinian fans. And it's always tough when you're in the shadow of a team that won 2 World Cups before, and you're in the shadow of a guy like Diego Maradona. So I think that's been part, and Maradona, like Pele, was uniquely loved by the local populace. He was very Argentinian to his heart. So I think that's been a hurdle for Messi, but clearly he's desperate to win it. But it's kind of a top-heavy team. It's very talented, but there's a gap between the offensive and defensive talent. There's certain key people they need for his system to work. One of them is injured and probably out for the tournament. A guy who plays off of Maradona, so that's going to be a little tricky replacing it. They probably, I believe it's set up so that they are guaranteed almost they wouldn't hit Brazil in the final, they would hit Brazil in the semifinals, which some may consider the real finals, depending on how this World Cup breaks down. So, and often it also depends on the run. Like when Italy won in 2006, they managed to hit the weakest opponents in the quarterfinals and in the semifinals they possibly could. Teams that sort of limped in and lucked out to get to where they're at. Whereas France had the brutal road. They had to go through all the other elite teams, including Brazil, to get to the final. And that ultimately gave Italy just enough edge. So luck always plays a role in who wins these tournaments. And it's the game of football, game of soccer. And that basically you have too few goals being scored. So luck can play a role. Like you go back and look at when the U.S. has qualified. More often than not, they had just enough breaks to get through. And when they didn't, they had the breaks went against them just enough for them not to get through. For these games that are so I see it as you have elite teams at the top, 4 or 5 teams that have super talent. Then you have very good teams, which, like you mentioned, if they're really well disciplined, can play like an elite team. And there's about 3 or 4 of those. And then you have about another 15 or so good teams, quality teams. And then at the bottom, you have weak teams that really are only there because their qualifications are weak. That they get to beat up on other weak teams to get in. Sometimes they luck. Some people think Ghana lucked out to beat Nigeria, for example, to get in and represent Africa. But teams and those weak teams historically cannot score in the tournament is their big hurdle.
Right.
So that plays into, for those folks looking at unders, looking at individual team unders. To give an example, the bookies are so skeptical of Saudi Arabia's ability to score. In one game, it's minus 600 for them to score 0. In other words, they're saying there's about an 85% chance they don't score a goal in that game. So you get numbers like that. But if I were making a bet, my bet on who would win the World Cup, I would have to lean Brazil. I think in terms of good value, teams that are 10-1 or more that probably maybe should be 5-1 or 6-1. And again, these bets, you could make these bets and then hedge out later by betting against them later in the cup and lock in profit. Teams that could make a run that might surprise people, or at least better than the odds, I think is really 3 teams. Germany, for some reason, people are down on them, but Germany has been dominant when they show up in this World Cup more often than not. I think that's an overreaction to the 2018 failures for them to even get out of group. But this team is an elite team in terms of talent, and they have a history of playing very disciplined ball when they get to this level, and their mindset is unaffected. They play like German soldiers going into Poland. I mean, it's that kind of aggressive, determined, unafraid approach. Saw that when they whooped Brazil in 2014. So I would put them more at 5-1, 6-1. They should be right there with those teams right behind Brazil to win it. And then and they could easily make a deep run, and then you could bet against them at the right time. I think the Netherlands, same dynamic, very, very well coached, elite coach team, performing at an elite level, in great form, fit the profile of a team playing at elite level form going into the tournament that usually overachieves. So I think that favors them. And even in their group competition, with the injury to Mane for Senegal, they have an easier path. There's less risk of an upset along that path. And then a team that is a kind of a relatively popular underdog because of their recent performance, Denmark. Denmark is a team that could make a run, maybe get even to a semifinals. Your Croatia type team, more so than Croatia, I think, this year, that could pull off some surprises. They're big underdogs to win it, and you could always hedge your bet late if they make a deep run. Who are your teams that are both? Who would be your favorites? Who would be your sleepers to surprise in the cup?
Good. So coming back to recent form, I think that one reason to think recent form will be an even more reliable indicator in this tournament is precisely the fact that in recent games, national teams have been doing exactly what they're going to have to do now. So in the games they played in September and back in March in the Nations League, they had to leave club play during a season, go play with the national team. So I think recent form is a good indicator of exactly what those teams have to be doing now. And if you look at recent form, definitely Argentina, I'd put them up there right with Brazil and Germany. Haven't lost a game in over 3 years. The last time they lost was to Brazil. They beat Brazil in the Copa last summer. But it's just amazing not to lose a single match in over 3 years. And the only loss is to Brazil. I think Argentina is another good pick. So I would put Argentina. I agree with you. Brazil would be my top pick. Absolutely. I think Germany would be almost a top pick too. Then I'd put Argentina right there as well. They've just been playing so well. And I also agree that what hurt the Latin American teams in recent tournaments was poor management. And now they seem to be much better managed. Both Brazil and Argentina seem to be finally managed well. And so their talent should get maximized. So I would say Brazil, I would say Argentina, I would say Germany. And then, yes, I think the Netherlands. And one reason, an additional reason to put the Netherlands there is they're especially strong right through the middle. So there are 2 center backs, Virgil van Dijk, who's the monster center back for Liverpool, and Matthias de Ligt, the starting center back for Bayern Munich. Virgil van Dijk hasn't been healthy for the Dutch all the time for the last year or so. He's now healthy. And then they go through Frenkie de Jong, the midfielder who plays for Barcelona. And what's striking about De Jong is, first of all, right now, everybody wants him. Like everybody's trying to buy Frankie De Jong. But everybody agrees that he actually plays better for his national team than in club play because he plays this kind of wild, creative, open game. And he just clearly feels more free to do that with the Netherlands national team. So now that they've got Virgil van Dijk healthy and Frankie de Jong can play his optimal game, I think the Netherlands is going to be a real candidate. I think they're going to be a dark horse. They used to have a bumper sticker in southwestern Michigan, where there are a lot of people of Dutch ancestry that said, if it ain't Dutch, it ain't much. And I think in this tournament, a lot of people are going to find out if it ain't Dutch, it ain't much. So I'd say the Netherlands. I think Serbia could be a real dark horse to make a run. But the big question mark is there are two great strikers, Mitrovic and Vlahovic. Mitrovic plays for Fulham in the English Premier League. Vlahovic plays for Juventus in Italy. They both have suffered injuries recently, and they might be healthy, but they might not. So if they're healthy, I think Serbia could make a real run. The story with that group is interesting because in the last World Cup, Brazil, Switzerland, and Serbia were together in the same group. And in this tournament, again, Brazil, Switzerland, and Serbia are together in the same group. And in the last World Cup, Serbia lost really tough games to Brazil and Switzerland, where they were in those games. And most of the players from that team are back. So that team's got to feel like, all right, we get a do-over. Serbia is a nation where those players care, man. They want to win, and they've never advanced out of the group before. So I think Serbia, if they're healthy, has a shot to make a run. I would also say that Denmark, and for the same reason. Denmark, they've beaten France twice lately. Since June, they beat France twice, and in games that mattered, where France was at full strength. So, and now they have Christian Eriksen healthy, again, playing for Manchester United, as long as everybody keeps the pads to watch his heart, right? Make sure it's okay. They have Christian Eriksen and Højbjerg, a midfielder for Tottenham, who's had an incredible run of play lately. So those guys in the midfield for Denmark really orchestrate the game. And when they're on, they can beat anybody. So I think Denmark, their center backs are also very solid, disciplined, defend well. So I think Denmark is a dark horse to make a really good run as well. The Middle Eastern teams going to sort of the bottom level, I agree that I don't know what to predict, because on the one hand, like you look at a Saudi Arabia, most of their players play in Saudi Arabia. They don't play in top leagues at all. So I haven't seen them play much. But of course, as you said, they've been preparing really hard for this World Cup. They will have cohesion. Some of them play together on the same clubs in Saudi Arabia. So they already have chemistry because they play together week in, week out. So I don't know what to predict and the same with Qatar, right? They could really be threats to people. One other team I'll mention that I think could be a threat and a surprise is Japan. People might remember Japan recently beat the US 2-0 when the US was at full strength. They had everybody playing. And Japan has some real talent, some really high quality talent. A bunch of them play in Germany in the Bundesliga, and they're very high quality players in Germany. And the one thing that Japan could do, especially against Spain, Spain plays a possession-oriented game in which they don't take very many shots at all. And I think that they could be vulnerable to a team that's good on the counterattack. So I think Japan could surprise some people. In the last World Cup, Japan made it out of their group, finished second in their group and made it out of their group. So I think that people underestimate Japan. I think they also could be a real threat.
Yeah, those particularly Japan and Korea have overachieved and overperformed
Yes.
ever since the World Cup was hosted there in 2002.
Yeah.
Very, very disciplined. We have, we saw them play in 2006. We saw Korea play Togo
Yes.
in Germany during the World Cup tour. And I remember saying that the unison of the team was reflected in the unison of the fans. I was like, this is a little bit scary.
Yes.
Almost natural totalitarians here.
Yeah.
Just perfect. Oh yeah.
Yes.
I was like, whoa, that's a little intimidating.
Yeah.
So I think they can definitely overachieve again.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some teams that might underachieve. So like right now, the World Cup odds 4-1 or so for Brazil, 6-1 or so for Argentina. And then you drop down, then it's France to repeat at 7-1. Then it's England at 8-1. Then it's Spain at 8-1. Then Germany at 11-1. Netherlands at 12-1. Portugal at 16-1. Belgium at 18-1. Denmark at 28-1. Uruguay at 40-1. Croatia at 50-1. Serbia 80-1. And then everybody else is 100-1 or more. The biggest long shots is actually interestingly, I would put Saudi Arabia here by talent, but again, there's that X factor because of their cohesion, their chemistry, their consistency, their ability to prep for the tournament. Like only Qatar is the only other team that's really prepped at the level they have. But Costa Rica is the biggest long shot currently. They had that wonderful run in Brazil many years ago that everybody loved. The Ticos were rocking. Yeah. But they did have to sneak into this cup, finishing fourth in CONCACAF, going through the playoff, had to beat New Zealand, knock out the Kiwis. And then, towards the bottom is you have Iran, Tunisia, Australia, Qatar. And as I mentioned, Ghana's getting no respect because of their recent performance. Mm-hmm. They're at 250-1 below Cameroon, below Morocco, below Japan, below South Korea, below Canada, which, by the way, is actually even with Wales to win the World Cup, which still, I'm going to have to see that to believe it. I still will. But as we look at some of these, Ecuador, for some reason, is 150-1. I have no idea why, because that seems a little overstated to me. Yeah. Why they're considered better likelihood to win than Mexico, the U.S., Poland, or Wales. I'm not quite buying that. I mean, Ecuador is a nice little team, but they don't have a bunch of offensive scoring, elite level talent.
Right.
Then you have Senegal, which somehow is still 125-1 despite the injury to Mane, which is massive. They're going to struggle to get out of the group at this stage. Yeah. Then you have Switzerland. So you look at, we'll start with the top teams. I look at France and England, Portugal, and maybe Belgium. I go back and forth on them as being a little overvalued. Yeah. France for sure. Their recent form has not been top notch. Then they have all the off-field problems. With the French president saying, "Hey, honey, I'm president of the French soccer team. Want to come over?" So he's got those problems. Yeah. England, they couldn't even win at home in the Euros, and their performance of late has not been great. Now you look at that team; it is without question the most talented. The Three Lions is the most talented Three Lions team in my view they've ever put out there. Yeah, but it's a little bit tricky measuring their talent because they all play in their own home league in the English Premier League, which is the greatest league right now in the world by a long mile. Yep. And figuring out, okay, are they really good independently, or are they playing because they're English in their home league? And maybe if they were Italian, they wouldn't be playing in the English Premier League necessarily, not at the positions, not at the starting roles they have. Yep. And I'm not a Southgate believer. I think they would have been better off. I get they can their Italian manager, but find another German, Dutch, or Italian manager. Yep. Not sold on Southgate. I thought he made terrible decisions in the penalty kick phase that cost them the Euros. Yes. So I think Spain deserves to be where they're at, 8-1. Germany, I think, is actually a little underrated at 11-1. Netherlands a little underrated at 12-1. And then next is Portugal. Cristiano Ronaldo is not only on the backstage of his career, he has not been in great form. I mean, all the problems at Manchester United, et cetera, all kinds of off-field issues. They do have a lot of young talent, but for a team built around him, I think that's, and we've seen them totally bomb out at tournaments before. They are fully capable of just being awful. Yep. I think 2018 was their high watermark for World Cup performance. And then Belgium, I go back and forth on, but Lukaku is a little bit nicked up. Not sure what his state, and this is not a team that has so much depth that can just replace guys like that. Right. And Hazard hasn't been the same Hazard in years. Yeah. And so what do you think about France, England, Portugal, and Belgium?
All right, let's start with England. I think England is a real question mark. It depends on which team shows up in a way, but I think they're vulnerable, potentially vulnerable. And the reason is that if you go from front to back, the talent does drop off a bit in quality. So up front, Harry Kane is fantastic. Raheem Sterling, since he went to Chelsea, it's been a little bit more iffy, I think. And then as you move back, players like Declan Rice, solid, but not a marquee player. And when you get all the way to the back, guys like John Stones and Kyle Walker have only been starting intermittently for their clubs. They haven't even been starting all the time for Manchester City. And the other question that you raised is the right one. All those guys now play in the most lucrative league in the world, surrounded by the best players from every other country in the world. All those English players are playing for clubs where they are surrounded by top shelf talent. That makes it hard to tell sometimes whether they are also the same level top shelf talent or just benefiting from the quality that's all around them because now that league has more money than any other league in the world. So I think they're a question mark. They could turn out to be just as good as people think they are, but I'm not sold yet. I'm not completely convinced. If you go to Portugal, the problem with Portugal is not the talent level, no question about it, except Cristiano Ronaldo now being so old. But across the midfield, right, those are starting midfielders for Manchester United, Manchester City, and Liverpool. And they're the heart of their teams in all three cases. The problem, as the last tournament showed, is they could not put that together into a team that worked at all. I've probably never seen a team with more talent that could not play cohesively as a team. So the question for Portugal is whether they can finally put all that talent together and play as a team. But again, I have my doubts. And then when it comes to Belgium, I think Belgium really is vulnerable. And for just the reason you said, Kevin De Bruyne will still be one of the best players in the tournament. He's one of the best players in the world, and they will rely on him.
And he's great at dives too.
Yes, he is. I was sad to see that lately, him turning to taking dives. I was disappointed. But Eden Hazard, you're exactly right. The old Eden Hazard is gone. The new Eden Hazard is just nowhere near what he used to be. And then the rest of the talent around them, when you start to look, guys like Axel Witsel, they're not really top shelf talent. So I think a lot will depend on that back line. That back line, Toby Alderweireld, Jan Vertonghen, those guys are at the very ends of their careers now. They're well into their 30s. Now, that's a position where you can keep doing it even when you're well into your 30s. But that back line has been what made Belgium such an elite team in recent years. And those guys are really at the end of their rope now. So I think Belgium is vulnerable, and I think they're in a group that's going to be surprisingly tough. Canada is young and athletic. Canada could give them problems. I think the other teams in their group, Croatia, is outstanding, right? So I think Belgium could be vulnerable and could be in real trouble. So I agree. I think England is sort of a complete question mark, but maybe vulnerable. And I think Belgium is really vulnerable. As I mentioned, I actually think Spain is a little bit vulnerable. I think they're a little overrated. And the main reason is if you look at their recent run of games, they will have 75, 80% of the possession and not get any more shots on goal than their opponent and only score a single goal. Now, as long as you can do that consistently, you're fine. But if they face a team that can bunker in and counter well, they could get upset, I think. So, but they're not as vulnerable as I agree. I think England, I think, is going to be up against the US and Wales, even Iran. So I think England is vulnerable. I think Belgium is vulnerable.
And what do you think about, France? I think their recent performance has been one. This is a team that when they have off-field issues like South Africa, they can completely implode.
Yep.
Mbappe has had all kinds of issues with club and country.
Yep.
You got all the scandals going off the field, despite ridiculous talent. I mean, talent that
Right.
matches Brazil's talent.
Yep.
I just see disaster looming for France.
Yep, I agree. And for France, Antoine Griezmann has always been a really key player in the midfield. Fantastic player. This I love his story. You know, he grew up in France, and they said he was too small to play. And so he went to Spain as a kid, and they said, "No, you can play." And he became a great player in Spain, came up with the Atletico Madrid system. But he's had issues since he went to Barcelona, and that didn't work out well for him at all. And then back to Atletico. I agree, there are a lot of off-field issues there, and it's not clear that that team will play well together. And then they lost Conte. N'Golo Conte's out, and he's a really important player for France. So I agree. I think France, and especially seeing them get beaten by Denmark twice in recent months, I thought that, and those were games that mattered, and France was at full strength. So yeah, I think France is vulnerable as well. I think that's right.
And I've never been a huge fan of Didier Deschamps. I thought they won because
Yeah.
of talent and, Pogba and everybody was and Mbappe were desperate to prove themselves in the
Yes.
2018 World Cup.
Yep.
I thought that's what drove that team, not great management.
Yep. I agree. Absolutely. And who hangs on to a manager for that long? How
Right.
long has he been in charge? It's like whether they win or lose, right? That guy must know he can't lose his job no matter what he does. And yeah, there have been times when that team clearly underperformed under him. So I agree. I have little faith in his ability to make adjustments if adjustments need to be made. That's right. Yeah.
Now, you look at the sort of the seller, if you will, the teams that are only here because qualification was easier for them.
Yeah.
You're looking at Costa Rica, Saudi Arabia, the three Arab teams, Qatar, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. You could kind of add Tunisia to that. Then you have Costa Rica and Australia in that category. From a talent perspective, if you looked at the sort of bottom level, so one of the things all these math nerds did with looking at World Cup club football, they looked at, okay, what about the market value of your top player? How much was that predictive of your performance? What about the median player on the pitch? In other words, the sixth best player on the pitch, or the sixth highest value player. And you can look at that from a transfer market perspective and other models. And then, or what about the first guy off the bench? Which was more
Yeah.
predictive? And what was interesting is they found all three were independently predictive.
Interesting.
And so your
Mm.
ideal roster has a high quality number 1, a high quality number 6, and a high quality number 12.
Yeah.
You look at some of these teams that are on the lower end, like Iran. Iran has a couple of top quality offensive players, though one of them is hurt. Is expected to play, but it may be banged up.
Mhm.
And then there's a massive drop off. And then of course Iran also went through, apparently their top player didn't like the coach that brought them all the way through qualifying, so he got him fired. At least that's all that happened to him, because worse can happen in Iran. But
Yeah.
the other and they brought back their old coach, who plays a totally different style that's pure defensive counterattack style. I mean, just packs the block basically.
Yep.
And that, I mean, that worked for Iran in the sense that they kept games close in their past World Cups. They haven't had the 5-0, 4-1, 6, embarrassing kind of results.
Right.
Though they haven't been close to scoring in many of those games either from an expected goal perspective. Saudi Arabia, again, there the question is, does their cohesion and consistency and advantage in preparation give them an edge?
Yeah.
Because there's nobody on that team that anybody thinks of as being an elite level talent. Costa Rica sort of got in. There's the past history of them being able to overachieve and overperform in these tournaments, but the talent level is not what they had. A couple of star players on that team that really went nuts in Brazil. Tunisia, not a lot of talent there. Qatar, the whole issue is, can they, or their 6 months of special preparation playing at home, give them an edge?
Yeah.
And then you have Australia, which Australia's had a habit of overachieving in these tournaments. I mean, they barely got in. They had to go through the playoff round to get in. But I don't know if they're managed or their style or some of their personnel is the kind of people that overachieved in the past. My own instinct is these teams are going to struggle. Usually they struggle to score. So for the gamblers out there, taking the under on them scoring, more than half the time, what I call your true number 4 seeds don't score a single goal in the first 2 games. And because of that, their opponent sits on the ball when they get a lead. And so a lot of the overs hit a low. The average total for a game involving a true 4 seed is 2 or less.
Yeah.
Whereas the when other teams are playing, it's more like 3 or more.
Yeah.
So what do you think about, can Australia overachieve again? Can Costa Rica overachieve again? Can these Mideastern teams surprise, including Tunisia?
Good. I would say, so Australia seems to me weaker than I remember them being in recent tournaments. They usually have a few players playing in the English Premier League. They don't this time around, right? They have a handful of their players play in Scotland, and I've watched them play in the Scottish Premiership. But you can tell how the difference in quality between Scotland and everyone else when you see Glasgow Rangers and Glasgow Celtic both crash out of the Champions League in the group stage. So Australia, players like Aaron Moy, who now also plays in Scotland, they're just not the same quality that I think Australia has had at least a little bit of in the past. So I think this Australia team is exceptionally weak, weaker than usual. And I think the same is true of Costa Rica. Costa Rica usually has had a few players who play in elite leagues. Now, most of them play in Mexico and Costa Rica, and they really struggled to get through CONCACAF qualifiers. So I think the weak teams in this tournament, some of them are weaker than usual. I think Australia's weak. I think Costa Rica's weak. And I agree. I think they'll struggle to score at all. Similarly with Tunisia. Tunisia once in a while has had some exceptional performances where they seem to play above their quality. But I would say the same thing. I think those teams are unusually weak for the weakest teams in the tournament. I think this time they're weaker than usual. That's right.
I think the Mideast teams will be interesting to watch. Normally, those teams would really struggle, but given that it's being played in the Middle East, given that 2 of the 3 have had extensive extra prep time in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and then Iran does have some talent up front, and that defensive style under this coach has kept games close and tight, and now he's got an elite forward to go with it. Might be enough for them to pull off some ties, for them to overachieve as well. We'll find out early because they're up against England in game 1.
Yeah.
And some of those middle of the pack teams that, we go from teams that are like 40-1 or more. If you go from Uruguay, Croatia, Serbia, Switzerland, Senegal, Ecuador, Mexico, US, Poland, Canada, Wales, Morocco, we'll put in those categories. Now, Morocco had a key injury to one of their key offensive players. It's probably out for the tournament. Same with Senegal. Mane maybe come back, but maybe not until match day 3. That really puts a lot of pressure on that team to overachieve. Because you're talking about a guy that's dominant and an elite player and is a star for that side.
Yep.
I look at that and I agree. I think Uruguay, Serbia, maybe more of a longer shot, Poland. Those are the teams I see as potential overachievers out of that group. I think underachievers, I think Mexico is going to underachieve. They've really played great in the World Cup, but this is not a great Mexican side. Mexican side that struggled throughout CONCACAF, that allowed even some U.S. teams that weren't at full strength beat them. U.S. put out a B squad that beat Mexico that had most of their starters on it. So this is not the same Mexican team as some past years. I think they may burn out and get whooped. We'll see early against Poland. And then as hard it is, Wales has a history of overachieving and overperforming. Question is some age. I think the U.S. is too young to make a surprise run in the tournament. And then Canada, incredibly well coached, a couple of key high-end young talent, though it's hard for me to imagine the ESPN guys, right, they're going to make it to the semis.
Yeah.
But, you know, they dominated in CONCACAF.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on some of those mid-tier teams? Who might make a run? Who might underachieve?
Good. I think a lot of people are not realizing or forgetting how good Croatia is. So I would say Croatia, I think, could be a dominant team again. And again, looking at recent run of play, they've beaten France and beat Denmark twice recently. So Croatia is still really outstanding. So I think Croatia is going to be a really impressive team again that could make a run. I agree with you on some of the others. Uruguay, I think Uruguay is good and probably underrated, could make a good run. Canada, the Canada team is interesting. So in addition to Alphonso Davies, the sort of star player who plays for Bayern Munich, young, athletic, great player. And then they also have a midfielder who plays center mid for Porto in Portugal. And Porto has been dominant in the group stage of the Champions League, where also the Iranian striker is their striker. But so that Canada team could be a real threat. I think they could really surprise people because they have quality talent, young, and well-coached and hungry. So I think Canada could pull, like especially against a Belgium. I wouldn't be surprised to see Canada have a shot to pull an upset. But Canada is in a tough group, really tough group, because Croatia is really good. Belgium is really good. And Morocco is really, really good. Thanks, Cody. That's right.
I think it's one of the toughest groups there is.
Yes, that's the thing. That Canada team is the real deal, but they got as rough a pick as you could get for a group to start out in. So I think they could pull an upset, but on the whole, I think they're going to have a rough time. But I think Croatia is underrated. I think that's right. Yeah. Then I'm thinking who else?
And then who you might think might underachieve in this group, in the sense that the same, like in that same area, you have Switzerland, Senegal, Ecuador, Mexico, Wales.
Good. All right. I agree with you about Mexico. El Tri has fallen on hard times. Chucky Lozano, Irving Lozano, they call him Chucky, is a phenomenal player for Naples. In a recent Champions League game, in the first couple minutes of the game, he scored an amazing goal. Came up with Pachuca in Mexico, phenomenal talent. So Lozano, I think, is the player to watch on that team. But the other players, Chicharito and Vela, they're older now, right? Those guys are so much older. And the rest of the talent on that team is just not the same level. And it shows. So I agree. I think Mexico's going to have a hard time. I think it's probably going to be a disappointing tournament for Mexico. Switzerland is really good. They're up and down, but that team, Xhaka, the midfielder who starts for Arsenal. Arsenal, of course, is currently on top in the English Premier League, and Xhaka his run of play has a big part of that. And then Shaqiri, some of the other players. That Swiss team, they've beaten Spain recently. They can beat anyone. So I think Switzerland also is a real threat. They beat Italy, a real threat to almost anyone. So I think they've got a tough group too, with Serbia and Brazil. But I think Switzerland is good and will probably have a good tournament. Mexico's weak. I think Poland will beat out Mexico, probably in that group. In addition to Lewandowski up front for Poland, Poland's main midfielder, Zielinski, who also plays for Naples, it has been playing incredibly well lately. Naples is on top in Serie A in Italy, and Zielinski is a big part of the reason why. So I would say Poland will do better than Mexico, I think. I think Mexico will struggle. Yeah, let's see, who else have I not covered now?
Well, I think the Polish fans will benefit from the fact they can't drink. You know, we saw the Poles play in Germany, of course, and They
Oh,
drink and they got bitter
Yeah.
as soon as that
Yes.
they were out of the cup.
Yes.
That they'll
Yes.
probably be in better spirits without the easy access to the
Yeah.
beer.
Yeah,
The
that's right.
let's talk about some of the top players and like goal scorer odds.
Yeah.
So right now, Harry Kane is the favorite to win the top goal scorer award at 7-1. Mbappe is next at 8-1.
Yeah.
Messi after that at 10-1. Neymar after that at 12-1. Benzema at 16-1. So you got two French players up there. Ronaldo at 20-1. Martinez for Argentina at 25-1. Depay for the Netherlands at 25-1. Lukaku for Belgium, even though there's some issues with injury risk there, 25-1. And then you have the next three Brazilians around 30-1. Richarlison, Pedro, and Vinicius.
Interesting.
And so looking at those guys, who stands out to you as most likely to overachieve, in other words, to beat the odds, if you will, in that capacity?
Well, at the top of the list, I definitely think Neymar is underrated there, in part because it's Neymar and in part because of the way those teams play. Neymar is more likely to be the principal goal scorer for Brazil. Other people will score for sure. Probably all those Brazilians should be higher on the list than they are, frankly. But I would say I would put Neymar at the top. That would be my guess.
Same.
And in part because Harry Kane, I mean, it depends on how things go in a tournament, but Harry Kane won the Golden Boot last time because he happened to be, the person they found to put it in, but he's not the only scorer for England, right? Raheem Sterling is just as likely to score. Phil Foden is just as likely to score. So I think it just happened to work out that way last time that Kane won the Golden Boot. I wouldn't put him high on the list, not because he's not a great effective striker, but because given the way England plays, I just don't see him scoring that many goals again. So I think Neymar is too low. The next player I think of who I think is too low on the list is Depay. And it's not because it's Memphis Depay, it's because he is the end of the receiving line of that whole Dutch team. So it's because he's at the end of the assembly line, as it were, that I think he's going to score a lot of goals, because that Dutch team is going to get him the ball to score a lot of goals. So I'd put Neymar higher. I'd put Depay higher, and all the Brazilians. And then Messi. The only thing is, of course, Messi often feeds other people to score goals, right? So if we were looking at like total goals and assists, I'd say Messi at the top for sure. But Messi often scores, but he also often sets up other people. But Messi should be a little higher, I think, too. Neymar, Messi, Memphis Depay.
I think Messi's where he's at just because he struggled to score in the World Cup.
Yeah.
That's where I think a lot of that comes from.
Yeah.
But this is a much more disciplined unit that runs through him. What I look at for like goal scorer odds is you want a team that's going to go deep, because that increases more games played, more chances to score goals.
Yep.
Priority one, priority two, a good offense, a team that's not built like England is, I still think, built on their defense. Much more that they're happy with 1-0. Their defense has been consistently dominant I think that's as much the style of the play as the personnel they have under Southgate. But I think that limits Kane's opportunities as well. And then third, I like if a team has a set person to take penalties, then that's a person who can get a few more easy goals. And of course, for Brazil, that's Neymar. Neymar takes all their penalties, and has one of the highest penalty success rates. So that isn't going to change. So you combine the three, Neymar at 12-1. Brazil has the best odds to go the deepest. They're the best offensive team in the tournament in terms of goal scoring opportunities in general. And Neymar's the guy that takes all the penalties. And the offense runs through them. And Neymar's not one of those. Messi will happily pass the ball to improve the scoring opportunity.
Right.
Neymar will take the shot. That's the nature of the animal. So combine that. I lean Neymar on that. So let's go to the group odds. Group A, Netherlands, strong #1 seed. They're basically saying about a 70% chance that they advance. Then you have evenly split Ecuador and Senegal at 4-1 and 5-1. And then they're in the home division with Qatar,
Yeah.
and Qatar is at 16-1,
Yeah.
which is kind of high for a 4 seed, but it's because they're playing at home. Any thought? Do you think those are about right? I mean, to me, I think Netherlands are definitely going to go through. I think I would put that as high as 80% rather than at 70% or 65, wherever it is. But I would have normally taken Senegal over Ecuador because I think they're actually substantially better than Ecuador. But with Mane out, what does that do for Senegal? At least for game 1, maybe game 2.
Yeah.
What does that mean between those two?
Good. And I am still torn about that because on the one hand, the rest of that Senegal team is outstanding. Koulibaly, their center back, who's the center back for Chelsea, is amazing. And up front, they have a player, Dia, who's also a phenomenal striker who, once they get the ball up there, he's not Mane, but he can score goals and score well. So the level of talent for the rest of the Senegal team is still significantly higher than for Ecuador. The only worry that I have is when you look at the different qualification paths, right? Ecuador had to go through the South American CONMEBOL qualifiers, where Ecuador is playing Brazil and Argentina and Uruguay day in and day out. And they managed to qualify playing that quality day in and day out. And they developed a system for doing it. They bunker in and they defend very well. They can absorb a lot of pressure and then they score on the counter. So Ecuador has figured out how to beat teams that are better than them. But yes, with all that said, the quality of talent for Ecuador is still weaker significantly. And so I would still pick Senegal to go through second in that group because that team was not just Sadio Mane. The rest of that team is very talented and they showed it winning the African Cup of Nations. So I think Senegal should be favored over Ecuador.
And I think Ecuador has an additional disadvantage in that they have to play the home team in the first game.
Yep.
That after the first game, there isn't a strong home team favoritism, but no home team has lost in the first game.
Yep.
And so that's why it's almost even money as to what will happen in that game.
Yep.
And then there are rumors circulating, which are more true potentially of Ecuador than it would be, I think, of other teams, because a good number of their players don't play for elite leagues,
That's right.
don't make big paychecks.
That's right.
The rumors on social media is that some people connected to Qatar have already bribed Ecuadorian players to throw the game. So this is widely circulating on social media. We have no idea whether the rumor is true or not, of course.
But,
and the fact that it got published and publicized probably reduces the risk of it actually happening, because now Ecuadorian players will be under maximum pressure to perform the best.
Yeah.
But I think having to play Qatar in that very first game, and Qatar has been not only preparing their team by itself for 6 months, unlike any other team in the Cup, unlike any other team in World Cup history.
Yeah.
They've also been preparing specifically for Ecuador for 6 months.
Yeah.
Right.
So that, if they do their job, they should draw that game.
Which is,
go ahead.
Which is, I think, is going to be huge throughout this group play altogether. I think cohesion is the third trait there that these teams in World Cup, especially since '98, since they went to the 32 teams, cohesion is that third trait. You have talent, discipline, and then cohesion. How well these players play together.
Yeah.
I think that's why you've had those European dominant teams since they've had that. You had France in '98. That Brazil team was just so talented in 2002 that they were able to overcome the cohesion issues. But then you had, Spain, Germany, France, again, Italy. All these teams had players that Spain team that won, they had over half the team played for either Real Madrid or Barcelona. And I think that's where you have some of these teams that underperform. That's the issue in that, not only do I think some of the English players are overranked and that gets exposed in World Cup play, but also they're so spread out among that English Premier League. They're playing on 16, 17 different teams, 18 different teams. These 26 different players are on 18 different teams. And not only that, they hate each other half the time when they're playing in the English Premier League. same with Brazil. I think that's how they've struggled, even though they had the talent to overcome that in 2002, I think they've struggled some, and Argentina as well, because of the lack of cohesion, because their teams are playing. And so I think in this group, Qatar, that's going to help them a lot. Now, I don't think they're going to make it out of the group, but that's going to help them playing in these games. I think that's a benefit for Ecuador, though. Those guys not having a lot of those guys that are out playing, so they're playing with a lot of home guys that play together a lot, and I think that's going to help them. It's a problem for African players as well. They always get, the guys are all over the world playing, and they're bringing them home, and so those teams that take that extra time to play together are going to perform better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, this tournament will test that in a major way.
Yeah.
It'll be very
this is absolutely. This is the perfect setting for that.
Yeah.
So I agree that I think Senegal should be better odds than Ecuador to advance out of the tournament, just because of the unique scheduling and talent, despite Mane's injury. Now Group B, England is the heavy favorite to win it, minus 300, 75% chance. Then you have U.S. and Wales about equal. Both of them have a 6-1 odds to win it, which means both of them are set as equal odds to advance. Then Iran is at 16-1 to win, and they're the long shot to advance. I agree that England is the strong favorite to win it. But I wouldn't put them at 75%, because the U.S. can upset them, Wales can upset them, and Iran can hold it tight, given the styles of play.
Correct.
So I think England's a little overvalued in that sense. I think they advance, but they could easily finish second. Wouldn't shock me at all to see them finish second. And then between U.S. and Wales, I think the U.S. has more talent, but it's younger.
Yeah.
And its away record has been atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't played well away from home.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on Beerhalter. The real erratic coaching capabilities.
Yep.
And the Wales has overperformed in these international conferences. They've got some, not only their guys are older, but they're also experienced veterans in big games.
Yep.
So I think the odds of U.S. or Wales advancing being about equal, I think actually makes sense. That despite U.S. has a talent edge, Wales has an experience edge and a cohesion edge and a big game on a big stage edge. And probably better managed, Frank.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think that's right. Berhalter himself recently said, I think that most people in the U.S. underestimate this Wales team. He said, when you look at the team, this is basically an English Premier League team. That's some of them have been in and out, but they're almost all an English Premier League team. And he said, I think people in the U.S. especially don't realize how good that team is. And the other thing that's relevant there is Wales has struggled lately at times because they're the two players who really defined the golden age for Wales were Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey. Both of them have been injured a lot, off and on, over the last year or so. They're now both healthy. Ramsey played a full game for Nice in France the other day. Bale is finally healthy. So those guys are healthy. And the other thing that has been striking is when big games come, they step up and play above their talent level. To get into this tournament, they beat Austria, they beat Ukraine. In the last tournament they were in, they beat Switzerland. They step up and play well in big games. The U.S. has more talent. There's no doubt about it. This has got to be by far the most talented U.S. team ever. First time ever that this team is filled with players who play on Champions League teams in Europe, like half of them or so. But they're all very young. And the U.S.'s recent run of form is just atrocious. I mean, and losing to Japan and tying Saudi Arabia, both games in which they were at full strength. They had everybody. Now, those games were friendlies, so in a way they didn't matter. But still, this was the run-up to the World Cup. So the U.S.'s recent form is really disconcerting. And the other problem they have, when you think about quality of talent, one thing that really matters is in which positions do you have most of that talent? Because if your talent is in positions like wingers, they can't control a game in the way that midfielders and defenders can to some extent control a game. So, and the US's talent, some of the really amazing talent, Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, Gio Reyna, those guys are all wingers, right? So somebody has to get them the ball in a good position for them to do what they do. So I think it's an open question. I agree. I think Wales and the US are evenly matched. And it will be another test of, does talent win, really superior talent for the US? There's no doubt. Or does cohesion of a team that has been playing together for a long time win out? That's going to be a test of exactly that. And for me, it's a wide open question.
Yeah, same here. I think that the difference maker may end up being the discipline, which is probably going to fall in Wales' favor as well.
Yeah.
And that might shock some folks that U.S. doesn't move on and it's Wales and England. But I could very easily see it just because of that question. The only X factor there is that USA team is far more talented.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And the other thing I'll add quickly, Tyler Adams, who's one of the somewhat unsung heroes of this U.S. team, but another one of the talented generation, went and played at Red Bull Leipzig until this year. He went to Leeds and he starts in the central midfield for Leeds. He's currently second in the English Premier League in tackles in the entire league. And tackles are defined as dispossessing another player and taking the ball. In their recent game against Tottenham, there was a point late in the game where Tyler Adams really started to take over that game. You could see him saying, give me the ball and I'm going to decide what we do. That is what that US team needs in the midfield. If Tyler Adams steps up and takes that role, then that team could turn into a very different team. And they are going to be really motivated against England and against Wales. But especially England, a bunch of those guys have a huge chip on their shoulder against a lot of the English players and managers they play against. So that's going to be an interesting game, and right after Thanksgiving Day.
And they're calling it the political division because it's U.S., England, Wales, and Iran. Right, so the U.S. is going to be playing Iran in match day 3 and all of that dynamic, the political dynamic that's sort of lurking and over.
Yep.
I think this team is very talented. I think they're very resilient. I think they're a tough, gritty team.
Yeah.
But I agree that the coaching and the management leave big questions, and lack of experience and performance away from home, and recent form as well in terms of not so much club play, but country play.
Yeah.
And then I agree they're overloaded of talent at key positions. What you really want is a team that not only has talent, the number 1, the number 6, the number 12 in terms of roster, but you want talent at the front, talent in the middle, talent in the back. And defensively, the talent is a big question mark.
Yep.
The other question I have is in terms of style. One thing with Beerhalter's style, with his high pressure style, if he's going to play Ream, who's more about passing, but can let people get behind him. It strikes me as that the U.S., like I think England's style tends to have games be low scoring.
Yeah.
I think the U.S.'s style will actually tend to make the games higher scoring. What do you think about that?
I think that's right. And certainly it's precisely because they're so strong in the front and somewhat weak in the back. So up front, they have players like Pulisic and Reyna and Weah. Get them the ball, they can score goals out of nothing. So up front, the U.S. is so talented, they're likely to score goals. And in the back is where they have weaknesses, so they're likely to give up goals. Serginho Dest at right back, lost his position at Barcelona. Now at AC Milan, he's not starting. He hasn't been playing in a while. Walker Zimmerman, great, solid player, but he plays in MLS his whole career, never played overseas, so there's a question mark there. And then at left back, Anthony Robinson has been playing very well. But who they'll play at the other center back position, whether it's Ream or Long, will matter. But whoever it is, I agree, that team can score goals, but they're also likely to give up goals. So most likely there will be some moderately high scoring games with the U.S.
And I think the only caveat is how teams play them, because if teams repeat the script that's given them trouble is teams that play, play a hard line in the back and play a defensive counterattack style. Seems to be the U.S.'s vulnerability.
Yep.
And Iran is probably going to play that style.
Exactly that. Yep.
England kind of plays that style, but not quite.
Yeah.
And I don't think Wales is going to play that style. I think Wales will. But what do you think?
Good. That's a good question. I actually think that Wales against the U.S. might play a bit of that style. And in part because of what the U.S. has in the way of talent. I think Wales will be very cautious. Rob Page is a good manager. He's definitely had that Wales team playing above their talent level consistently. And knowing the talent the U.S. has up front and in the midfield, I suspect Wales will bunker in. And what they like to do is they have Kiefer Moore, this really tall striker who plays for Bournemouth, who they play off of him out to the wings. And Daniel James, who has incredible speed, Gareth Bale, those guys. I think Wales might play a defend and counter game against the U.S. But it will be hard because Wales will be able to possess the ball and they'll be tempted to do it. So that'll be an interesting question. But I kind of suspect that Wales will play a defend and counter game. And in part because I know they've talked a lot about having thought about the U.S. team in that game for a long time. I mean, first time in 64 years that country's been in the World Cup. They are as gung-ho as they can be and want to win it. So we'll see.
Yeah, and you got a lot of guys that love to play for country and show up big.
Yeah.
Those teams that have guys that love to play for country, the two-player teams that kind of overperform, the deeply patriotic teams that love to play for the flag and the country, and the other are guys looking to showcase their talent to get bigger paychecks.
Yeah.
Those are the teams that tend to really do well, and that will be a caveat to what I think would normally be U.S. overs. Will be if everybody plays them in this style, it may lead to unders.
Yeah.
All right, so going to Group C. Argentina, big favorite, 67% chance of advancing. I think that's a little low because of who else is in their group.
Agreed.
And because of the quality of playing. I would say that that's a good bet. Argentina should be more like minus 400, 75% or 80% chance that they win that group. The other teams are Poland, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia is a distant 20-1 to win the group. I don't think there's any chance of that, to be honest.
Yeah.
And the only question is whether they pull out some draws because of their cohesion and consistency and being able to take more time out than everyone else playing in the Middle East for the first time ever in a World Cup. I don't think. I mean, Poland and Mexico are basically listed as even, about 5-1 to win, and even as to who's going to advance. I think Poland should be favored over Mexico in that situation.
I agree. I think that's exactly right. Poland has been playing very well recently, and Mexico has not. And this Polish team has some key players who are in an exceptional run of play. Lewandowski and Zelensky, they've been playing better and better every week for the last several weeks. Mexico, even Irving Lozano doesn't start half the time for Naples. So yes, I think Poland should be favored to get out of that group over Mexico.
I do too. I think it's an easy call. Argentina, Poland coming out of that group. Yeah. Mexico's a pretty far back third, in my opinion.
Yeah, that'll disappoint some folks.
Absolutely, yeah. My brother La Domingo gave me his picks, and he's from Mexico, big Cruz Azul fan. And yeah, he definitely has Mexico coming out of that group. I told him it was a homer pick.
Is Sam following it much?
Yeah. Oh yeah, a little bit. Not quite as much as his father, obviously, but yeah. He's already got his eye on some of the teams. Bet on both Brazil and Argentina, the Latin teams, obviously, to win already, and he's looking at maybe some other ones.
Yep. I think it's Mexico's recent World Cup performances that has them where they're at,
right?
Not Absolutely. Their recent club performances or talent.
Correct.
Yep.
Group D, France, minus 225. I think that's about right because of who else can win that in there, which is one other team. Denmark plus 225. I think this is one of the weaker groups because then you have Australia and Tunisia. Yeah. You sometimes get what I call 4 seeds, and you get 2 of them in the same group.
Yep.
And I think that's the case here.
Yep.
Australia and Tunisia both 16-1 or so to win it. The only reason I think France minus 220, they're in against Denmark, who's already shown they can beat France.
That's right.
in very recent games.
Yep.
So that was probably an unlucky draw for the French.
Yeah.
You've got all the off-field issues. Now, I think Australia and Tunisia don't present much of a risk at all to either one of them. So it will come down to the match between the two of them. But Denmark has proven the ability to do it. And I would probably favor France a little bit less than the current odds have them at. But I think those two going through is it's a high odds bet already. But so I think that's correct.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That's one group in which I think it's virtually a lock that even if France is struggling, still France and Denmark are both going through in that group because Australia and Tunisia are just both so weak that those two are going through no problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's those are gimmies.
Yeah.
Up next is Group E, where you got two elite teams in the same group, Spain and Germany. They're equal favorites to win the group. Then you have Japan, is a live dog, 14-1. Costa Rica at 50-1. Yeah. I think like Costa Rica is one of those teams, given this group, is likely to exit with 0 points. I don't see them winning a game. And then the question is whether Japan can be the difference between Spain and Germany advancing. I do have Spain and Germany advancing at about those odds. But but Japan's going to beat Costa Rica, and if they say tie Spain or Germany, then what happens in the Spain-Germany game all of a sudden can become real consequential. Because like let's say if you're Germany, then it ends up being like a goal differential or some other standard as to who it gets to advance. But what are your thoughts on that group?
Good. So I think Germany is likely to win the group. And I think it's because they've had a better run of play recently. They're clearly more disciplined. I think that they will do better against Japan because a bunch of those Japanese players all play in Germany. So the German team knows them and knows those players, and the styles are more similar. I don't think the Japanese defend and counter style will give the Germans that much trouble. Whereas I think Japan really could give Spain a hard time. So I suspect Japan does better against Spain, whatever that is, maybe just goal differential. But I suspect Japan does better against Spain than they do against Germany. And so I would give the edge to Germany to win that group. I still think Spain goes through. It's Germany and Spain who go through. But I think Japan will play the spoiler, and I think it'll favor Germany winning the group.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Up next to the Group F, Belgium only minus 160 to win because, as you mentioned, the toughness of this group. Next is Croatia at 2-1. Then you have Morocco at 10-1 and Canada at 12-1. I think Canada is an overachieving, overperforming team with some elite talent at key positions, both offensively and defensively, and very, very well coached. And their recent form has been good. Their qualifying form is very good. Morocco, until the injury, I really liked. One of their key offensive players looks like he'll be out for the Cup, one of their elite players. That might, sidetrack their otherwise ambitions, but they're a live team in any of these games. Croatia, as you mentioned, has overachieved, and this is the overachieving team that's back together again. Still Luka Modric and other players that are essential to that team, integral. And as you know, Belgium, comes in with Lukaku a little banged up, and has on the backside of a lot of those key players' careers and tenures, and are ripe for maybe not even advancing. If there is I think if there's an odds bet, it's that Morocco or Canada, I think, to advance is something like 5-1, either one of them. That might not be a bad long shot bid, because this is the place where Belgium could get tripped up and maybe not even advance. There's a reason why they and Portugal have the least likely odds to win the group of all the number one seeds. And so I think, if anything, I would almost say Croatia might even be a little overvalued at plus 225 to win the group, just from the sense of because this group is so wide open to a certain degree. It has a lot of depth, a lot of matchup issues. And so you know, it wouldn't shock me to see Morocco or Canada pull a surprise in advance.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're right. When you have a group like this where everyone is strong, it makes the odds of any particular team winning the group, not as good, because anything can happen. A lot's going to happen in these matches. So I agree. This group is more wide open in terms of what's going to happen because there's quality on every one of these four teams, and there are matchup issues. That's exactly right. I would slightly favor Croatia to win the group myself. And as I said, I think Belgium is really vulnerable to not getting out of the group. So I would right now still pick Croatia and Belgium to get out of the group, but I wouldn't put the odds too high, because anything can happen in that group, because Morocco and Canada are both good.
Oh yeah, they are. I have Croatia and Canada coming out of this group. I got the upset with Belgium not making it out.
Right.
Croatia winning the group. But yeah, I mean, this is when you have a group like this where it's tough to call which two teams are coming out of the group. It's even more difficult to call which team's going to win that group, obviously.
Yeah.
And Belgium hasn't even performed great when their players are at their best.
Right.
And they're not
Right.
at their best.
Right.
And I think they got a little unlucky draw in, as opposed to Australia and Tunisia, it's Morocco and Canada.
Right.
Very different. And Canada's probably going to be a surprise team for many because they're new to the Cup. I mean, I don't remember the last time. I think it was 1986 the last time that they got there. Yep. And it's a lot of young and some really young players, but they just played so well in the qualifying. And since then, they just seem to and very well coached team. And the right personnel at the right positions. That can match up well against these teams. Group G, Brazil at -275 to win the group. Switzerland at +450. Serbia at +600. Cameroon, the Lions at +2,000. About 20 to 1 odds. It's interesting to me that Cameroon is the longest shot to win any group, but it makes sense well, it only kind of makes sense. It's actually respect for Switzerland more than it is respect for Brazil, because Brazil's -275. I think it's more like an 80% chance that Brazil wins this group. I don't see these teams giving Brazil that much of a trouble, much difficult. And then between Switzerland and Serbia, I think Serbia actually has slightly better odds. Well, they're listed as the weaker chance to advance. I think they have the better chance to advance than Switzerland. This is not some of the real talented Cameroon teams of the past. So I hope they, have a nice, fun surprise, get friends from Cameroon. But it's not overly likely, especially, frankly, against these three squads. I mean, Brazil's dominating. And then Switzerland and Serbia are very disciplined are very quality teams that often play well. Switzerland a little up and down for my taste. And I just think Serbia is kind of due to overachieve and pull it off more so than Switzerland in this Cup.
I agree. And I agree with you that Swiss team is really good. It's a really talented team, but they are up and down. From week to week, they can win a big game against somebody like Spain, and then they can turn around and tie or lose to someone they shouldn't. So as long as Mitrovic and Vlahovic are healthy up front, they have both, when they're healthy, been playing extremely well lately. So Vlahovic was just sold to Juventus, plays up front for Juventus. Mitrovic at Fulham. Both of them have scored a lot of goals. And right behind them, Tadic, who plays for Ajax, is a great creative midfielder. And yes, that team is due. It's the same team that went through this group last time and lost some tough games from getting some tough breaks. And their recent run of play is good. So I think Serbia is going to pull it out and get out of the group. But it will be tough because Switzerland is good. And Cameroon just doesn't seem to have the talent. Sometimes, too, they make strange coaching decisions. Like they have one player on Gisa who now starts for Naples, great midfielder. And he's not always in the lineup for Cameroon, even when he'll be on the bench. So, but yeah, I think Serbia pulls it out, but it's going to be tough with Switzerland and Brazil.
Agreed. And for folks watching Serbia, they have several players with the same last name, kind of like Jones and Smith in the U.S. So don't be thrown off. There's a Mitrovic in defense and things like that. Group H. This is the last group. I think it's the deepest group. Because of what I think about Ghana. So Portugal minus 160 to win it. So they're saying about a 60% chance that Portugal wins it. Uruguay is 1-in-3 chance of winning it. They're strong favorites to advance, with South Korea at 10-1, Ghana at 16-1. So in my view, Ghana is being listed as like a number 4 seed.
Yeah.
And I get that based on they barely got in. Their AFCON competition performances were very subpar.
Yeah.
Their coach is kind of erratic. They don't have chemistry. They don't have cohesion. They don't have consistency. Many of the key players are just playing for the first time for their country.
Yeah.
However, from a talent perspective, they've added one of the top strikers in the world. They've added one of the top defenders in the Southampton key central back. They've added 2 other players that don't play much that are all saying they're going to play. And I think it's a combination of talent that has experience at a high level of European competition and that's been performing well in good form with their club teams. And they have personal monetary reasons to have a good performance. I don't think they would have come up and played for the national team unless they had confidence they would look good doing it. So for those reasons, I think Ghana at 16-1 to win the group is my best long shot odds of any group team. And Ghana to advance. They're Ghana in some of these matchups where they're massive underdogs in individual games, 8-1, 6-1, etc. I kind of like Ghana to overachieve where I'm betting on talent and motivation. But if they bomb out, it'll be a sign that you got to have chemistry, you got to have cohesion, you got to have consistency, you got to have team performance. But I think South Korea is a team they can beat. South Korea is a team that'll be a great matchup. In a sense, South Korea is all about cohesion, consistency, and chemistry. But it's not about talent. This is one of the lesser talented South Korean teams to come through. They still have a couple of elite guys at the top, but that's about all. Uruguay is always tough. I mean, this is the place that kind of invented the World Cup to a certain degree. And they've got the old vets. Hopefully Suarez won't be biting people again this World Cup or doing handballs next to the goal line. They actually helped him win that key game by him willing to do this because they missed the penalty. But I think, as we mentioned earlier, Portugal, like Belgium, is vulnerable. Uruguay is one of those 5 teams that recent performance would suggest they actually have a shot to win it all. At 40-1. So I think Uruguay is tough, but Uruguay's not a high scoring team. They win a lot of games 1-0. You can surprise them, you can draw them. So if Ghana were to draw against Uruguay, were to get a surprise win over South Korea, depending on how Portugal performs, Ghana could slip into an advance. And especially given the long odds they're given. I call them a high variance team. They're either going to really overachieve because of their talent level or really underachieve because of their coaching and consistency and chemistry issues that are totally unknown. I mean, like the striker, that's an elite level striker. This will be, I think, his first game ever for the Black Stars. So who knows what that looks like. But I like, when you're betting long shot underdogs, I like high variance teams that, at least from a talent perspective, you can see competing with every team in this group.
Boy, I have to admit, I hadn't thought through the impact of the recent acquisitions by Ghana. When I saw you predicting Ghana, to do well, I wasn't sure why. And then when I thought through it, I realized, and I have to agree, the quality of the talent they've just picked up is unbelievable. And they're in a pretty good group to exploit that, because I do think Portugal's vulnerable. And that has shown in past tournaments, right? Portugal's had a hard time in past tournaments getting tied or beaten by people who nobody thought they would.
The U.S. did it to them.
Right, exactly. So with Portugal and Uruguay, Ghana has a good shot against both of them. I agree, very good shot. So yeah, I hadn't thought through it, but now I have to agree. Ghana actually, those odds are great odds to take on Ghana, because they've got a good shot to win some games and go through. I think that's right.
And I think from there, it's going to be a lot of matchups. Like a lot of people try to project matchups, but I stay away from that because it rarely quite fits what people expect.
Yeah.
and that's a play it by ear. I think in a the first 2 matches are bettable matches. Match day 3, you got to wait. I would not recommend anybody bet it early because you don't know if one team's already out, one team's already in, one team needs a draw, both teams need a draw. You don't know what they're playing for in match day 3.
Yeah.
I think match day, and I also recommend waiting even on match day 2, because match day 1, there was a U.S. player talking about this, saying the psychological impact of match day 1 can really influence match day 2. Coaches also can get desperate. So if you have coaches that, will make wild shifts, you look at someone like Beerhalter, who's, wanting to coach the 2026 team, really needs this U.S. team to advance. What happens if they lose to Wales? Then he might do crazy mixes, and he has a history of making wild substitutions and changes in roster, et cetera. So you have to monitor that variability of the emotional reaction to that first game. I mean, I don't think, Germany in 2018, I don't think ever recovered from the first game that, Argentina never really fully did a couple of cups ago when they tied Iceland. So those kind of, and the flip side, those surprise teams that pull a surprise in that first game tend to get such a rush of confidence in the whole squad that you can get a Costa Rica type team. Many African teams in the past, like Ghana, all of a sudden go on a riotous run because they all of a sudden have confidence at a different level. And confidence plays a major psychological role with players who don't play game in, game out, week in, week out with one another, or even with that coach. I think that's something to watch for. In terms of totals, I would recommend looking for unders with teams like Costa Rica, Australia, Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Qatar. Those are the teams I think are legitimate 4 seeds. And even if the money lines might be a little shaky with the Middle Eastern teams because they might overachieve given the uniqueness of this tournament being played where everybody else is coming from their club teams. Many of them are not. Iran's mostly coming from club teams, but not in the case of Qatar or Saudi Arabia. Qatar preparing for the last 6 months. Saudi Arabia preparing for the last 2 months. They cut their league short just so their national team could prep and prepare. And if there is, there's so many controversies around how Qatar got this World Cup. That if there's unusual officiating in their favor, there's going to be a lot more concerns raised. Or, if a team like Ecuador seems to mail it in, Chicago Black Sox style, then, that will raise concerns. So that's something to keep an eye on. And, but I think it will be a fun cup. We'll see how US, Mexico and Canada are the next host. They're all in this cup. Somewhat, surprisingly, at least in the case of Canada, the U.S. missed it last time. Mexico has been pretty dependable finding a way to get there, but a weaker Mexico team. But it'll be fun watching how those teams progress. Absolutely. There's people who don't like Beerhalter who are hoping the U.S. stinks so they can can them so they get a different manager. And if that happens, so there's mixed sentiments for some. I mean, most U.S. fans, of course, are cheering for the U.S., especially against Iran and England and Wales, given the politics and the history. Particularly England and Iran. But I think this first game will set the pace for a lot of these teams to either overachieve or underachieve, and you can factor that in the match day 2. And we'll see how teams adjust and how much schemes, they've had a lot of time to prepare for one particular team.
Correct.
How much do we, in an age of analytics, in an age of deep film analysis, do we see do we see coaches really come up with game specific game plans? That's a bit of, I think that's what helps Canada, for example. I have a lot of confidence in Canada's coach. I think it may hurt the US because I don't have a lot of confidence in him. May help a team like Qatar, who again is prepared for 6 months to play Ecuador to at least tie and not be the first home team to lose their first home game in a World Cup. But I think it is Brazil's World Cup to lose, though I'll be cheering for Argentina and would love to see one of the underdogs, a Netherlands, a Denmark, a US, a Wales, any of those teams make a Poland to Serbia, make a surprise run in the tournament.
Yeah, agreed completely. Same here. I would pick Brazil, but very much rooting for Argentina. Messi should have a World Cup. There's an argument he might be the greatest player ever, and that guy should have won a World Cup. And Argentina loves the game as much as anybody. So, yeah, I'll be rooting for Argentina, though I have to agree, I think Brazil is favored. And then I love the small nations that, this is their shot at glory. So countries like Serbia and Wales, Canada, right, Senegal, some of those countries where everyone will be tuning in to watch their national team play and want to see them win. I will love to see some of those small countries make a run. So I think it's going to be a great tournament. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm the
Absolutely.
same. I'm rooting for the Argentina as well. Really want Messi to get that World Cup win. But I'm actually looking towards Germany. I think that cohesion is going to be a big
Right.
issue.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think they're at the top of my list that possess all three of those things: talent, discipline, and cohesion.
Yeah, true. That's a
and then
good point.
and then I'm excited to watch some of those smaller European teams, Denmark and Netherlands, see what they can do and tear up in this tournament.
And I think if I agree that my favorite long shot to win the cup is Netherlands. And if Louis van Gaal pulls that off, it'll go down as one of the great managers. I don't think, the great Clockwork Orange team didn't pull it off. The Dutch have never won a World Cup, to my knowledge.
Right.
And so it'd be fun to see them pull an upset, as much as I would like Messi to, of course, win and respect this super uber talented Brazilian squad.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I'm hoping the Black Stars do well.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Cool.
This was, go ahead, Gordon.
No, that's good. Fantastic.
Yes.
This was great. I really enjoyed it. This was great fun.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody. Remember, Sports Wars, like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be giving exclusive picks all World Cup at sportspicks.locals.com, where you get the best value for the best results in the sports handicapping world. Sportspicks.locals.com. Thanks, everybody.
Good gambling.